Gimli Distillery is a massive distillery located in Gimli, Manitoba. It's near Winnipeg. It's owned by Diageo and is huge. They have upwards of 1.5 million barrels there. I'm not sure if they have more barrels than Hiram Walker and Windsor, but they're both huge, and both upwards of 1.5 million barrels. So really, really big. Gimli is home to Canada's best-selling whiskey brand, Crown Royal. So originally, the distillery was founded in 1969. Production moved there from the Waterloo facility to basically meet demand for Seagram's VO. And once a lot of the production moved there, Crown Royal started to outpace VO as the big whiskey brand, and then production kind of shifted to Crown Royal. It should be noted, the Gimli Distillery kind of works alongside the Valleyfield Distillery together to produce whiskey for the Crown Royal brands and some of the associated ones like Seagram's VO. Valleyfield basically tries to match up what Gimli's doing these days, so they're trying to at least produce some of the same things. But the heart of the operation really happened in Gimli. Awesome distillery. I wish they would do tours. They don't. You can show up and you think, oh, Crown Royal, massive whiskey brand. No tours, unfortunately. Hopefully that'll change someday because they make some really, really good whiskey. When you think of Crown Royal, you probably think of the basic brand, which is so-so. But all that goes into that brand is really remarkable. So they make 5 different types of spirits. Well, I guess 5 different types of whiskey. Sorry, at Crown Royal, or at the Gimli facility, and then they blend all those together into a lot of their products. They use all different types of barrels as well. So Crown Royal, really, they are masters at blending whiskey. They're really, really good at it. In terms of what they make, I really wish they would do single casks of each, just because it's fascinating to see the diversity of what comes out of one distillery and how good all the whiskeys are. They make 2 base whiskeys out of corn. They make a continuous corn base, which basically, the corn goes in, it gets mashed, it gets cooked, it ferments for 60 hours, and then goes through a column still twice. And so, you're basically getting, it's a continuous industrial process through. So you get quite a light base whiskey. It's decent tasting, so it's a pretty standard base whiskey in terms of there's a bit of toffee in there, a bit of spice. If you look for something similar-ish, Canadian 83, if you find it, is representative to an extent of that, but there's that's not all it is. But a very light whiskey. Then you have another base whiskey. So they make 2 types of base whiskeys from corn. That's called their batch base. And it's basically made in batches. And so you have a batch of corn that goes through, gets cooked, gets fermented, and then goes through the first column still, the beer still, and then it goes through another still, which is, it's a bit like a column still on top of a pot still. And you, in that situation, you're kind of like a pot still. You're discarding your heads and your tails, so you're getting something very specific. It's a light whiskey. I love this whiskey. It's really luscious, creamy, very light still, like kind of what you'd want in a base whiskey, but a really, really nice complement to their other base whiskey. And I really like Crown Royal Limited Edition. The Crown Royal Limited Edition has a bunch of this batch base in it, so that's when you can kind of get a sense of what that batch base tastes like, although there's other stuff in there as well. So 2 base whiskeys, and then they make 3 different types of flavoring whiskeys. The first one is a rye whiskey made from 95% rye, 5% malted barley. You can see that in Crown Royal Northern Harvest Rye. Tastes very, very different than your standard Crown Royal. Big, flavorful rye. So you have the rye go in. It ferments for longer. They're flavoring whiskeys. They ferment them all longer to develop more flavor. And then goes through a column still twice. And then comes out, gets put into new oak primarily, and that's, the flavoring rye whiskey at Crown. Or I should say at Gimli. Really rich, really awesome stuff. They also make two other types of flavoring whiskey. So one of them is made in the style of a bourbon, and there's a bourbon mash, or I guess it's called blender's mash, whiskey that sort of has a lot of this. It's a mixture of 64% corn, 31.5% rye, and 4.5% malted barley. They're fermented together, fermented for 75 hours, so longer again than the base whiskeys. And then it goes through the column still, the beer still once, and gets put into new oak barrels and some reused barrels, but a lot of new oak. So in that sense, with the new oak, you basically you have a high rye bourbon, went through column still once, went into new oak. And so you can see that in the blender's mash. There was a special release of a 13-year-old blender's mash that was released a few years ago. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite Canadian whiskeys ever. Really neat thing coming out of Crown. So kind of it tastes a lot like a high rye bourbon. A bit different. Your aging characteristics are a bit different in Gimli, but yeah. Anyway, nice whiskey. And then the final one, which is kind of the star of the show, is it start the same as the bourbon style whiskey. So you have that 64% corn, 31.5% rye, 4.5% malted barley. It goes through, it gets fermented for 75 hours, it goes through the column still once, and then what they do is they put it through a coffee still. So it's an old still. They only operate it once a year, and they do that because there's so much tinkering required to get it right. And so it's really kind of an antique type of column still. And what you get coming out of it is what they call our coffee rye. And it really is the heart of all the blended Crown Royal whiskies, in my opinion. It's this luscious, creamy, very confectionery, rich, grainy spirit. There's really nothing like it. And you can see it in the hand-selected barrels from Crown Royal or the Blender Select. So very, very unique. Incredible. It's one of the true stars of Canadian whiskey. So that's a bit on kind of Gimli, what they produce. And I do want to get to some tastings. The favorite thing I've had from the Gimli Distillery would be a toss-up between a few things. And these are all among the best Canadian whiskeys I've ever had. One is some of the hand-selected barrels have just been so stunning, just absolutely incredible. Probably my favorite is a few years ago they released a limited edition of a 16-year-old rye, which was jaw-dropping. It was really, really good. They released a whiskey last year, 2021, called Winter Wheat, which still just an awesome whiskey. And that one as well is, probably in my top 20. So some really, really nice stuff out of Crown Royal. Again, if you can look past the base brand, which is, it's not great. There's a ton there. The other one that I don't usually have, but a lot of people like, is Crown Royal Black. It's a bit hard to get over all the coloring they put in it. It looks, quite brown. But I know from a lot of competitions I've judged, a lot of people who favor bourbon type flavors tend to gravitate towards that one and rate it highly. So that one's at least worth trying if you can get past all the coloring that's in it. So a bit about Gimli. Awesome distillery. I hope we see way more from them. The last number of years they've been releasing a Noble collection, which is an annual limited release. Fantastic. There's been a few releases that have sort of been so-so, but pretty well every other release is just an absolute stunner. So it's one to follow. It's at this present moment the collection that I'm most excited about in terms of an annual limited release in Canada. So really, really neat stuff.